With us today on To My Way of Thinking is Audrey Gibson. She is one of those tree shakers, policy makers she has been, and one of those people also that just helps to make our world a better place. Thank you for joining us, Audrey.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, it's been a couple of years since we had an in depth conversation, and you've had some changes in your life as you've had many times. The biggest things that obviously everyone can note is that 20, when I looked at it, it seemed to tally up to 22 out of the last 24 years you have been in office. First, as a Florida State member of the House of Representatives, and then as a Florida State Senator representing parts of Jacksonville, Florida, up until about 2022. And then you took a run at a local office here. And then after that, you participated in a staff of the current mayor for a spell, and all of that with a degree from the Florida State University, criminology degree. So it gives us pause to ask you the first question that I asked you some time ago. What is the state of our city and our state?
Mm. Well, and thank you for that historical journey. And I actually, it was actually 20 years because I started in 2002 in the House. And initially, my district went all the way down to Daytona Beach. And after redistricting, then it was changed totally to uh, Duval County, a larger portion, of course. And so, in terms of what's going on today, is that your question in terms of what's going on today?
What's the state? How do you view after that your time in office, being a participant in the politics and policy of this state and city? What do you view as a state of affairs of our city and our state of Florida?
Well, let me start with the state first. Obviously, Democrats are in the super minority in both the House and the Senate, and so that makes it very difficult to put forward your own agenda as legislators and member of the Democratic Party. It may not necessarily be Democratic Party issues, but those issues that are impacting um, people across the state of Florida, regardless of party, and we always should understand that. But obviously, there's a little more focus on working people and the issues that they're facing when you have a better balanced legislature. And so when I first came to the legislature, it was a super minority. And as a leader, right before I left, 2 years before I left, I was able to get us to a place where we could procedurally do things. And so when you have the right number, 17 it is in the Senate, you can at least procedurally stop some things. And that is um, um, when you call the question, if you will, which is not necessarily what we call it in the legislature, but when you can bring up some technical issues or create a tie, then you can procedurally do some things. At this point, you can't. So, unfortunately, we have a governor who is, I would call him a trumpet, and is certainly disappointed that he did not get a position in the Trump administration. However, he is still following Trumpism, particularly as it relates to immigration. Let's go there, for example, because that is what the legislature had a special session on very recently. That issue, and in the end, they created the State Board of Immigration or something like that at the cabinet level. And I believe our own Sheriff T.K. Waters was appointed to that commission. And so I think what's lost in the state in trying to follow the federal pathway is ultra focus not it's not just on illegal immigrants. Trust me. When you start going into schools and churches, you don't care what the status of people are. You just dragging folks out to see what that status is. And that is not the way we should operate. And the other thing about that is many immigrants are doing the work that some other folks won't do, right? So, who's going to take care of the vegetables, for example, that are grown in this state and provide food on the table throughout Florida? Who's going to um, do some of the cleanup at construction sites? Who's going to help us in this state if we have enforcement officers going into schools, churches, neighborhoods, and just snatching people out?
Well,
That
apparently, Audrey, it's going to be the thousands of federal workers that have been fired that are going to be looking for jobs. Apparently, they're the ones who are going to be going out there picking the oranges and working at the coffee shops and that sort of thing for looking for jobs because, quite frankly, nobody seems to be really worried about that. The biggest thing that voters were what was actually the third biggest thing that nationally voters were concerned about was immigration, but that appears to not be a real concern of anybody about who's going to do it. I guess the federal workers that are being fired, like I said, they must be going to do it.
right, risen to the top over what people actually said was number one on their list, which was their cost of living,
Right,
food on
exactly.
the table. And you can see in the polling that people across this country are saying, well, that hasn't been the focus. And because of that, we're gonna give you some low rating to let you know how we feel about you, Mr. Trump. And so we'll see where that goes. But so the state is still focused on immigration. As if you talk about the state of the state, and obviously we can't pass some of those things that are helpful to working people because there's so much focus on trying to get rid of people at the state level.
Why did Democrats around the state, and particularly here in Jacksonville, why did they go so much for the top of the ticket nationally? We've got an activist. I thought we had an activist Democrat Party leader within the state. I was not terribly impressed by the leader here in Duval County, but basically, the state went Republican. And even with from the standpoint of voters, I understand a bit why some Cuban Americans down in Miami will continue to vote Republican, but I don't understand why Haitian Americans who are able to vote and still even here in Jacksonville it went red. Why is that? What happened? What's going on with the Democratic Party?
And since you mentioned Haitians, Trump is going after Haitian Americans. The party and nationally didn't have a message, and I call it cultural competency, and that we need to have met people where they were. Social issues alone don't carry the day. People told us that they were concerned about kitchen table issues, right? There was no message about those issues for hardworking people and how they can stretch their dollars and how they're going to be able to pay rent and insurance costs, which is a huge driver in this state in terms of dollars and cents. But our message didn't really galvanize people. And so I understand women's rights, and trust me, I believe in women's rights. However, those messages on the amendments overrode the messaging that people needed to hear in their communities. And we have to understand too that different communities are different. Even within the Black community, right? We don't all think the same, walk the same. We have needs, but they're not all the same. And so I have told our state party leader and others that We should have led with an economic message. That should have been our major message. And we should have led with a state of Florida message, because we don't live in Wisconsin or any other state. We have to hone in on a national message that is relevant to Floridians and what they're going through. And that didn't happen. And here we are.
Well, here we are. Now, in terms of Jacksonville, and this can apply to any state around the country for people who view this podcast from wherever you are. But in Jacksonville's case, again, it voted red nationally for the most part, but somehow it managed to vote a Democrat in office as mayor while still having a majority Republican city council. Was that due to message, personality, and name recognition? What was that due to that made such an anomaly for Jacksonville?
Well, I think it's a coalition, people voting in a coalition, right? That's part of it. Obviously, there was a want for change after a Curry administration, something that an administration that was somewhat more compassionate. Um, and so I when folks can come together on certain issues or certain values, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents can make a difference, which I believe is certainly what happened in the city election. That happened. People wanted something different besides what we had before, because the sense was there is much corruption in the previous administration and a lot of pandering.
Pandering, huh? Well, well, some people would argue that. What about what? How do you feel about this business of DEI, which is now reaching from the top to the bottom with it? What's it? Diversification, equity, and inclusion. Uh, I don't think any of us really concerned ourselves with it until recently. Now it's become a bad word. It makes white people feel bad about themselves. How do you feel about this DEI uh, um, sickness that's finding its way across the country?
Listen, DEI is a code word for black. Let us not be confused.
Okay.
It's morphed and become a whipping board rather than recognizing that African Americans and Black people are extremely intelligent and quite capable. So it's turned into something negative on purpose to continue to keep uh, African Americans out of positions that they deserve to be in. And so it's a code word. And I actually pulled an article. I wanted to look a little bit about the benefits, who's benefiting from DEI, right? Just like affirmative action is pretty much the same thing, or at least the same principles. And the information that I read that said actually, just like affirmative action, DEI has benefited more white women than others, right? Um, Giving them more seats at the table and higher positions. And I don't have an issue with people rising to higher positions and getting more opportunities. I have an issue when uh, Black folks and other minorities are left out. And the entire focus was supposed to be to make sure that we had work people in the workforce and in higher positions, in particular senior level management, who look who look like communities and who look like America, not just certain people rising to astronomical in astronomical numbers and leaving others behind. Um, and this whole federal workers, all of the things that are happening to our federal employees. I'm skipping back to the nation. Um, it's ultimately going to impact all of us. And generally, when it something impacts all of us, it impacts the Black community even more so. Um, there's Social Security checks and distributions that are involved, and we have a nutty bird who is the health person, who didn't believe in vaccines, who doesn't even understand the community or the nation, period. And he proved that during his during his interview. He didn't even know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. That's a problem. And then we have this man, this South African rich at birth man who grew up during apartheid, controlling our country. We shouldn't be confused. Trump isn't controlling it. He is being told, and he does nod his head. And it's illegal that Elon Musk is sending um, your fired papers, your fired papers and emails to anybody. He's a special assistant, but he's not appointed nor confirmed to any position of authority.
Right. It's a frightening thing, quite frankly, that the road that we're on, but America voted for it. What's in the time we have remaining here? What's next? I think I hear already what's next for Audrey Gibson. We're looking forward to you continuing to participate and, in some cases, lead activities within our community, state, and nation. What's next for Audrey Gibson?
I know Audrey Gibson continues to be engaged in the. It's just in my blood. Even from birth, my parents were always engaged in the community through their different organizations, and I just took a different road. My dad was an educator, my mother was an educator too, but she was also a healthcare dean at FSCJ. I couldn't do the healthcare teaching, but certainly using all the things that I learned where my parents focused on others, I will continue to do that. Um, I don't have to be elected to do that. So I'm going to continue to do it. And you know what? I'm going to see where God leads me. My faith is in He who loves me more than anything. And I ask Him to order my steps every morning and expand my territory too. So we'll see what He has for me. And I want to pivot to really quickly to the state of the city. Here's my concern. I have a couple of major concerns that I want people to pay attention to. Number one is, as we see all the development, we can't just pay attention to city council. We need to also be paying attention to getting on zoning boards, zoning commissions. But and another issue that is really troubling me is the Downtown Investment Authority. We need to pay particular attention to what's happening there. I believe, with all the things that have been happening, that development on on the other side of 20th Street Expressway is not happening or going to happen the way it should. And that with all of the downtown focus, and it's okay to focus downtown, but people live in neighborhoods, that everything will move up to 20th Street Expressway, and on the other side will be still left behind. Just look at the movement. You'll see if you go down Myrtle Avenue and go to your right or your left in Durkeeville area and beyond, you'll see where the what is heirs property that unfortunately the heirs did not keep or maintain is being taken up with building rental houses on it at $1,200 plus a month. Our folks cannot build wealth that way. And so we're getting a lot of apartments, but we need to focus on making sure that African Americans in this city are able to afford homes so that they can build wealth and be able to send their kids to college. That is an important issue that we need to make sure that we are engaged in, so we don't continue to be left behind on the north side and the deep north, as I call it, even closer to the airport.
It
That's a
sounds it sounds to me, Ms. Gibson, that you have found a calling because there's a gap between the people who are elected to office, who speak out occasionally on things, and those community organizations, which there are a plethora of them, but there's not a community, a civic minded, informed leader out there to speak regularly to power on the issues you just named. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from you on these issues, and spreading the word as about what you just talked about. And I thank you for your time.